Today's message is Ephesians chapter 5, and it's verse 2. Having said in chapter 5 verse 1, therefore be imitators of God as dear children. And of course that is the link between the challenging passage at the end of chapter 4, the last section, verses 17 through the end, then this section coming into chapter 5. I just want to zoom in on Ephesians 5 and verse 2. Walk in love as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling aroma. And I thought this verse really stood out when I was reading through chapter 5. In the previous section, chapter 4, verse 17, you'll see here, this I say therefore and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind. Paul's appeal to the Ephesians and to us as Christians by the word of God is not to walk in our old life, but it's interesting that chapter 4:17 says don't walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, and then the next reference to walk in Ephesians is Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 2. And so what we see here is that one of the things that will distinguish or should distinguish the walk of a Christian from the walk of those who don't know God is a walk in love. But then of course the example we have is Jesus Christ. Walk in love as Christ also has loved us. And you remember that love is the badge that marks the disciples and the followers of Christ. You remember what he said in John 13 verse 34, by this shall all men know you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. And whilst as Christians we do display love, we must remember the example that we have of love is Jesus Christ himself, as Christ also has loved us. We think of how Christ has loved us despite our faults and failures and flaws, despite our doubts and times of disillusionment and discouragement, and yet that is how we are to love each other as Christians, and also how we are to display his love in this world. And not only has he loved us, and of course the ultimate display was at the cross, but also he loved us in our daily lives as we live as believers. He's given himself for us, and that brings in an added dimension, that brings in the idea of sacrifice. It's amazing to think that Christ loved us. Romans 5 verse 8 says we were sinners, we're enemies, and yet we're now reconciled through the death of his son. But it also says here that he gave himself for us, and then he gave himself as an offering and a sacrifice to God. So primarily it was that sacrifice, the offering of his life and the sacrifice at Calvary, but that was to God. It was his devotion to his Father that led him to do that, and that reminds us that our love should be primarily because we love Christ. But then we get this beautiful expression at the end, for a sweet smelling aroma, and that goes back to the Old Testament. It goes back to the Leviticus and the first three offerings, the burnt offering, the meal offering, and the peace offering, and the aroma from those sacrifices brought pleasure and delight to God, as the Israelite would come and offer their sacrifice of devotion. And of course those are symbolic of the affection of devotion of Christ. Chapter 2, his life, and chapter 3, the fact that he brought reconciliation between God and people. But we might think, how can my life, chapter 5 verse 2, be a walk in love, follow the example of Christ, be an offering and sacrifice for a sweet smelling aroma? And I was just thinking about this morning, that if you were to turn over two books, Next book, uh, Philippians. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 18. You'll read this. Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus, who was sent from the Philippians, to give gift, financial support to Paul, the things sent from you. And here's the expression: a sweet smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well pleasing to God. And so God has left it on record that it is possible to delight the heart of God through love, sacrifice, and giving. Thank you for listening.